let me tell you, baby, you're not big dog. You don't frighten me. You think you're smart, but you couldn't outsmart a flea. So don't try to pull any of your tricks on me. 'Cause I got a brain Einstein could just so. Chest like you think you're hot, but let me tell you, baby, you're not. Big dog, you don't frighten me. Big dog, don't frighten me. Big dog, you don't frighten me. Big dog, you don't frighten me.
Hello, I'm Dr. Joe Gordon. Welcome to this week's Healthy Pet Show here in the studio with Dr. Jared Conley.
Pleasure to be here, Dr. Joe.
It's been a while since you've been on the show.
It's been a little while. It has.
Glad to have you back.
Miss being on the show.
And tonight we're going to open the lines for you to call in at 996-6775. Again, 996-6775. But as you can see, we're sort of surrounded by a jungle of various plants and rather than animals. And we're going to be talking about these plants tonight with regard to their potential toxicity and problems that it might cause if your dog or your cat were to eat them. It's that time of year where I know Debbie, my wife, she goes out every week and buys a handful of plants and brings them home and asks me to put them in the ground. And so a lot of people are out there buying plants, putting them in the ground, and as you can see at the stores, of course, Home Depots and Logan's and places like that are full of them. So
bursting at the seams with all sorts of plants.
So, but again, a lot of them do have toxicities to our dogs and cats, and that doesn't mean that you don't buy them and plant them. It's just to be aware and be careful about them, especially if you've got a puppy or something like that has a tendency to chew on the plants.
And to put everyone at ease, realize that the toxins that plants have, their design is to prevent themselves from being ingested. I mean, the term chemical warfare is really what we're dealing with, and they're trying to prevent an animal from eating it, so it has a chance to grow a little better, a little stronger than, say, the plant beside it. So a lot of these toxins have been developed over thousands of years, and the ones that have the toxins have lived, and the ones that haven't have been eaten by deer or whatever furry creatures might be roaming around. With the vast majority of the plants we deal with, most of them have a bad taste. And so usually a bite, a lick or two, and most animals are going to stop and walk away. And rarely, if ever, we have a problem beyond that. What comes into consideration are the kittens, the puppies, or even the stubborn dog who will eat everything, including your chair at home. Those are the ones that we unfortunately end up seeing with more serious GI upsets.
Okay. So we've just got a select number of plants here tonight, but if you have a plant there at your house that's in your yard or in your home that you have a question about, Dr. Conley brought his handy reference guide.
I bought a small cheat book. There's only a few thousand plants that are toxic with several different types of symptoms. This is the A section. So there's quite a few. And again, the good news is there are some that are extremely dangerous. Foxglove or your digitalis type plants are extremely dangerous, but the majority of them, one lick or two and one bite, unless you've got the stubborn pet, and you're going to be okay. And there are a few that are not as toxic as you would think. The classic one, wrong time of year, is the poinsettia. Everyone listed as a severely dangerous house plant. And it is dangerous, and I think a lot of times you end up having poinsettias in the house, and the new puppy comes at Christmas time, and they'll get some stomach upset and some mouth irritation from it, but it's not going to cause death. So maybe sick for a few days, but that's about all.
And most of what we have here tonight is not going to cause death either, but good to be aware of it in case your pet does chew on it. or the symptoms that you might see.
And when in doubt, call and ask. That's a safe thing to do. A lot of these symptoms won't start to show for several minutes. You may have a half hour to 45 minutes. And unfortunately, at that point, you may have missed your window. Your best time to control any toxic event is the first 10 to 15 minutes. So if you can stop it before that time, just call and ask the question.
Okay. So tonight, if you have a question about your pet or your plant, give us a call at 996-6775. Let's start with this, Dr. Conley. Very common ground cover here, English ivy. This is the variegated type with 2 different colors in it.
That's right. I thought it would be prettier for TV tonight.
Okay. And again, very common. I have a lot of this at my house. What's the symptoms I should be concerned about if Graham goes out and eats a leaf or 2 or a whole?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, your best defense for most of these plants is usually the beginning of a bitter taste. So a lot of dogs will hypersalivate. They can, if they ingest a large portion of it, gastrointestinal upset. So they may even develop some vomiting associated with it, or GI upset. Severe ingestion of it can cause organ dysfunction, particularly damage to the liver. And there have been some reports of kidney disease, but that's pretty uncommon.
Okay.
Cats too may also be in this area trying to nibble on this, especially the new little budding growth in the beginning of it, especially as they're chasing other animals through the ivy, trying to get a hold of them. And out of frustration, they may stop and chew on some leaves. So they also can have some GI upset also.
Okay. Now, deer will actually eat this, and they don't get sick from it. They have a different stomach system.
Right. It's amazing, ruminant-wise, as you go through and try to figure out why your deer can eat half of your plants in your yard and not get sick, but nothing else does. Their stomach system is designed for breaking down of a lot more harsh, fibrous plants, and much different than our own. And unfortunately, things like azaleas and ivy and a lot of your lilies are good snacks for them. Okay. Much of this may, which the gardeners love, because then you have to go buy more plants.
Okay. All right. Well, you just mentioned azaleas, and this was probably one of the first toxicities, as far as outdoor plant toxicities, that I ran into as a practitioner.
What did you see?
Early in my career. It was a dog came in and had eaten an azalea. It was very pale, almost in shock, and not very responsive. And we found that it had eaten azalea, and we provided supportive care, IV fluid therapy, and we were able to pull it back and get it back feeling well again. But then I have had a patient that I lost with azalea toxicity once before too.
And azaleas, all of those class of plants fall into that. So your rhododendron, the azalea, the 30 different varieties of azaleas that are out there. I'm always impressed every time I go back to a nursery. There's a different azalea bush that they've come out with, but all of them fall into similar symptoms. But ingestion of it is more than a leaf or 2. I mean, they do have to eat some of the plant, and really the entire plant's toxic. Particularly with azaleas, it's the stems and the bark has been shown to have more GI issues than the flowers, if you will.
Yeah, and the patient that I had eaten probably about half of a larger azalea, and was very sick from it.
Gosh, well, and again, timing-wise, very important. That first 30 minutes is really your best time to figure out what's the problem, what is this potential toxin, and treatment-wise, I mean, if someone's to call you with a potential plant toxicity, treatment-wise, what do you think would be an appropriate course of action?
Well, most of the time it's going to be supportive care, because for many plants like the azalea, we don't have antidotes for them. And if it's just a bad taste, one of the plants, say like the ivy that has a bad taste, where they're salivating, getting ready to be nauseated, maybe rinse out the mouth.
The classic one, speaking of bad taste, is the elephant ear, which is the next one there. This one, surprisingly, I'm always in awe that animals choose to chew on this. It's pretty. I guess maybe you'd think it's a salad, but dogs will come in and have gnawed on this, and it will actually cause pretty significant swelling of their mouth. It's a very bitter taste to it, and the swelling and burning in the mouth can last a few hours. But it's not toxic beyond just a topical irritation. Some people have also reported getting rashes and irritations from open wounds or cuts, so there must be something on the external part of the leaf that caused some irritation. For people, a similar things have been reported as far as having a swollen or irritated mouth. The good news is, hopefully the animal, usually a dog, has learned their lesson and will leave it alone. But again, you have the few that have short-term memory challenges.
So, and these plants come in various sizes and shapes, or various sizes, all have the classic elephant ear looking leaf on it.
Right, and they can get huge.
Very huge. There's actually I've seen some growing wild, probably some ornamental ones that were put out and
dispersed and
got out of control. So, but Caladium is the name.
Correct.
The scientific name of that. Okay, and this is one that very lovely plant, a lily, and this one's getting ready to bloom here. It's a bulb plant, and in general, most bulbs are toxic.
Correct.
Is the correct thing to say, but the lily's unique in that all the plant is toxic, right?
That's right. Lilies, in general, any lily. Oh, I guess we have a phone call.
Okay.
We'll pause for a second.
All right. Let's go to our phone line here. Hello, you're on the Healthy Pet Show.
Yes. I have almost a 15-year-old Labrador Retriever. Periodically, she eats grass and then she throws up.
Okay, eating grass, that's a very common concern that's brought to my attention on almost on a daily basis. Either the cat or dog is going out eating grass, and sometimes they'll throw up from it. The grass typically is not toxic unless it's been treated with herbicides or fertilizers shortly before they eat it. This time of year, as the grass is growing, it's lush and green, there is a tendency for the dogs to want to eat it more frequently. Why a dog eats grass is sort of that $64,000 question. They may eat it because they have an upset stomach and they want to purge themselves.
Right.
That's one possibility. Another theory is that they're looking for some sort of nutrient that we aren't providing them in their daily diet.
Right, and some of them, again, back to that time of year, they like that fresh cut, that freshly grown new grass, and apparently for them it has a fairly sweet taste. But if you're eating it and then throwing up afterwards, I would say they probably have some sort of a stomach upset beforehand, where they don't feel well, they don't feel good to their stomach, and they've learned from past events that by eating grass, it helps me get rid of whatever's in there. So they're really using the grass as a bulking therapy to help clear out their GI tract. I would guess that's probably more of an inherited trait run down through the centuries, so to speak. But again, as long as they're having this done infrequently and they aren't chewing on grass that's been treated with herbicides or fertilizer, most dogs are fine. If they're having multiple episodes of eating grass, you should come in and talk with your local veterinarian. That might be an indication of a more serious problem.
Okay, very good question.
Thanks. I think we may have lost them. So
Okay.
if you have more questions, give us a call back, please.
That question reminds me of a book called Wild Health, where it talks about what animals do and the different types of plants they eat for various reasons, and their just the intuition or instinct that they have to eat a certain plant at certain stages of their life for various reasons. And grass is one thing they spent a whole chapter talking about when didn't really give an answer as to why they eat grass.
And there are some things out in your yard, that can cause some gastrointestinal upset, and also some that make great wine, like dandelions. But there are quite a other that are plants that are out there. Even some of your milk thistle. Those weedy plants with the long little thorns that you sneak up on you walking barefoot. Those little guys can cause some mouth irritation. As well as potentially causing some nausea as well. But again, your biggest concern in yards, especially this time of year, are the fertilizers. The majority of chemical companies state the safety and efficacy of their product, and in reality, most of them are very safe. But again, you are applying an uncommon chemical, and fertilizers, especially high in nitrogen, high in ammonia, any of those will cause gastrointestinal upset. So it's a standard part of the spring veterinary season to unfortunately see dogs coming in with GI upset, vomiting and diarrhea, or even bloody loose stools from eating grass or from being on areas that have been treated with fertilizer.
So you want to be especially careful if there's standing pools of liquid fertilizer in your yard or herbicides, and then also if there's granular fertilizer that's just sort of in clumps. It does have a salty taste to it, and the dogs might tend to be attracted to it initially.
Right, right. And I guess moving on to common things around the house or outside that people are putting out this time of year. One that gets replenished frequently, a little off subject, are bird feeders. The fresh bird seed is better for the birds. Fresh bird seed is also a little less dangerous for dogs. Sunflower seeds, the black oil, the black sunflower seeds, will cause a pretty significant mucousy loose stool in dogs. Not toxic for them, but I think a little too much fiber than what they're used to. However, the big scary one is, I dumped out my moldy bird seed out of the bird feeder and I put in new bird seed. That moldy seed, you think, the ground animals will get it. It's probably going to be your dog that's going to go over there and find that. And the scary one in that are the fungal toxins, the aflatoxins that are in there. And you had one of those a week or two ago, I think.
Just about a week and a half ago, we had a dog that ate moldy bird seed and had neurologic symptoms. Came in stumbling, seizuring, and it took a little while to figure out what was going on because the owners didn't realize it eaten their bird seed until they went back home and looked around. But it was, fortunately, it was a good outcome. We were able to provide the dog with supportive care, control the seizure activity, and it was back in just this week for a recheck of its liver profile, and everything was normal. That's the long-term concern with the aflatoxins, is liver toxicity.
Right.
So you've got a lily up here. We started to talk about that.
We got sidetracked. Yes, we did. The lily, in general, anything that has the word lily in it is going to be poisonous to a cat. That's the simplest way to say it. Some are more toxic than others. Cats are especially vulnerable. They end up getting pretty severe liver inflammation and liver disease from this. Dogs, not quite as severe, but they will still suffer from gastrointestinal upset and some mild transient liver inflammation. Cats can die from lilies. And unfortunately, they don't have quite as bad taste. And so we end up seeing a fair number of cats chewing on lilies. And even just chewing of the leaves, not necessarily consuming it, just by getting that saliva mixed in with the broken plant material can cause that upset. And again, unfortunately, deer don't seem to be bothered by it, and lilies are a common favorite of the deer walking through.
And again, the part about the lily is that all parts of the plant, the flowers, the leaves, and the bulbs are toxic.
That's correct. And in general, as Dr. Joe had said earlier, pretty much all of your tubers and bulbs have some degree of toxicity, specifically the iris, which for dogs and cats isn't quite as severe, but can cause some upsets. That also is an issue. And we have a little example. I tried to find our best possible look here. Might just want to open one up and take a look. But these lilies are purchased recently, at the store in this manner, ready to be planted, and they grow great. Unfortunately, they even smell kind of nice where they are now, and dogs will get into these and eat them before you have a chance to get them in the ground, which would obviously cause some problems.
Okay. All right. So, and other bulbs earlier this year, tulip bulbs, daffodils, things like that, they were out blooming.
Yep. Pretty much all of them. Mm-hmm. But again, unfortunately, the deer are immune to their poisons.
All right. This is more of a little bush plant, the oleander. Tell us a little bit about the oleander.
Oleander is one of the few exceptions. This is a broad generality, so bear with me here. In general, a lot of your high wax leaves, so the majority of your high wax leaves that have the shine to them, we got a Philodendron here that's similar to it. The majority of those cause GI upset and have a bitter taste to them. That's their primary defense. Not always, though. This one has a fairly glossy leaf to it. It's more of a blade as opposed to your classic spade on most of the other plants. This one is fatal for a lot of dogs. It causes your beginning of GI upset, vomiting, and diarrhea, but will progress relatively quickly into neurologic signs, staggering, comatose, and eventually death. And fortunately, it does taste bad, so most dogs stop before they get to that point. but it's one of the few beautiful common plants that you've got around your house that are relatively high fatality rate. And they fall into the digitalis type category of causing irregularities of the heart as it leads into death. And makes you a beautiful plant though, grows well, and is fairly deer resistant. Apparently it causes them some problems too.
Okay. And beautiful blooms, very well covered. We've got several of these in our yard, and they do look very nice when they're in bloom.
Yep, beautiful plants.
So,
one of the not so toxics that are pretty common is a peony, and is also a rhizome or bulb type base to it. It's a perennial, so it comes up in the summer, and what's nice about it in the winter, you can just mow or mulch over it because it's gone by then. The biggest attraction for them are ants. But again, one exception to the rules is another shiny leaf. This one's a big difference though between the other. It doesn't have the same thickness or stiffness to it. And so you have the shiny leaf without the thickness and stiffness, and also not as much gloss. Doesn't really cause that much of a toxicity issue. Again, if you get down to the bulb or rhizome issue, it can cause some GI upset. But another beautiful blooming flower that's fairly common down here as well. These tend to be somewhat deer resistant.
right. And you know, the glossy leaf is really a good thing to keep in mind, because we had a case the other day. The dog had eaten aruba. Was that the right name for that plant?
Yes, yeah.
I think. And it was the client had brought in a sample of it, and it was just a shiny leaf, variegated in nature. And just by seeing the shiny leaf, Dr. Conley was able to identify that it's probably got some GI upset toxicity. And so
yeah. But again, you should look. I mean, that's why I have this book here this evening, in case I got a strange phone call. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of toxic plants that are not only common to this area, common in North Carolina, but some of these plants are from originally from Japan or different parts of South America or even Africa. So we have such a wide amount of imported plants into this community that you're not going to know right off, and that's the point of a reference book or what have you, because there's so many different possibilities. And even drug interactions, you have to realize that some of these will cause mild GI symptoms but can interact with certain drugs. The classic ones they might interact with would be a certain type of antibiotic, or even some of your hormone supplements can be challenged by these. One of our common indoor plants we have over here, I would say probably, if not everyone at home, at least everyone's grandmother or someone has had one of these plants.
And probably try to give you a cutting off of one too.
You can't kill them. They grow forever. I have one in my lobby at the animal hospital, and every single animal leaves it alone. Again, back to your shiny leaf. And again, it's got a very bitter taste, gastrointestinal upset, and this is a philodendron, your spade-shaped, never-ending vining plant that everyone's grandmother has had at some point.
And what's attractive to cats, if a lot of times these are in hanging baskets, they're hanging down
They're fun to play
close to the floor. Even puppies, they're fun to play with, yeah.
Yeah, and some GI problems. Now, I looked and looked and looked, and I wasn't able to find any of our common plants that we eat that are toxic to animals. Okay, and not necessarily the entire plant, but certain portions of it. And so we'll talk about those for just a few minutes. And one of the simplest one, again, back to the bulb items, are the onions and garlic, that family. So all of your onion, the bulb itself, the stem and your little chive tops aren't quite as bad, but all of your bulbs do cause gastrointestinal issues, and specifically they'll cause a rupturing of the red blood cells. It causes a Heinz body anemia, where they'll start breaking up the red blood cells. So animals can come in with a very dark discolored urine, a GI upset, and eventually severe anemia. And one onion is all it takes. So we're not talking, oh, he ate a bushel of onions. It's just one.
For an average size 30, 40 pound dog.
Correct.
Okay.
And garlic as well. Again, everyone, there's such a stark difference in taste, but again, back to that bulbed plant, can be severely toxic to them. There's some discussion about right now in the veterinary community regarding grapes and the grape seed itself, about how toxic those are. It depends on who you talk to about the severity of it. Some are convinced that any grapes are toxic and will kill your dog. That includes raisins. Other veterinarians have not seen any toxicity. And so we're trying to determine, is it related to a breed or a predisposition to sensitivity? But in general, stay away from grapes with your dog.
You mentioned an interesting one on the way in. We were talking about, you mentioned rhubarb, which is an old-fashioned plant, if you will. My mother used to make pies out of rhubarb, and my grandmother did, and you'll find rhubarb growing along the side of the roads in some places.
As a side note, I actually gave some to my mom, who used to make rhubarb pie for me, but I gave her the rhubarb plant, hoping that I would get pie again at some point in the future. So she has a little batch of it growing out beside her house now. I'm sorry for interrupting.
But anyway, so rhubarb is toxic. The leaves are toxic, not the stems, but the leaves are toxic to dogs. Is that right?
That's correct. To people as well. I was surprised when I was reviewing that the not just the you can't just cook the entire plant. You have to basically just cook the stem. Cut off the outside, peel it, and cook it. But the leaf itself can be pretty rough.
Okay. And one of the antidotes for that is to give them ice cream.
You joke with ice cream, but milk, it's a specific calcium oxalate, and so by giving the milk, it binds with it. You still need to cause the animal to vomit to get as much of the plant material and the toxin out of their system.
Okay, very good. Well, Dr. Conley, very informative tonight. I appreciate your expertise, and thank everybody for watching, for the phone call, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time here on the Healthy Pet Show.
Cats, 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 cats. I love plenty of cats. Big ones and small ones, short ones and tall ones. They all make me laugh. Cats, 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 cats. They're all I adore. Though I've got a million, I'd make it a trillion. There's always room for more. Cats, 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 cats. How I love a crowd. Skinny and fat ones, orange and black ones, love the sound of meow. Cats, cats,